What is Starting Step? How did it come about, and when did it come about?
I've been in the third sector, so charity sector, for many years, over 13 years now. And some of that has been working with people who have touched base with the criminal justice system. And after lots of focus groups, working with other charities, I realized there was a gap. There are three things somebody needs when they've either been in prison or been convicted: a roof over their heads, support in whether they had mental health or addictions, and a job. And a job was almost impossible with a conviction. And so, having spoken to a significant number of people now, I realized that that might be something I could help. Now, the reason I've chosen hospitality and horticulture is I can get jobs. I can get people jobs in those two sectors. I'm being slightly, I suppose, selfish, because obviously starting a restaurant, it is useful for me to be able to grow my own vegetables and make sure they're organic and locally produced. And it fits so beautifully with actually training in horticulture. But it will be much more than just growing veg. It will be, I suppose, educating people in the environment, in what is carbon neutral footprint, allowing them to actually produce perhaps a qualification that can let them go and start their own jobs. The hospitality side, well, Scotland certainly will be struggling in the future for I suppose, people to fill jobs. And hospitality for me is a great place for them to start. And so hence, I did consider doing it with other charities, but realized the only way I could absolutely guarantee that my vision was not either diluted or watered down in some form was to do it myself, hence Starting Step. It was really born out of frustration that significant number of charities or third sector organizations who are only there to fill a need that isn't being filled by the public or the private sector have to rely on grants. And I don't want to do that. I want to be fully sustainable in the third year. I want to be able to say, no, if I want to work with Fred for 3 years, I will do so, rather than, oh, I can only work with Fred for 6 months because that's the money I've got to work with him. And obviously the vegan side, well, I'm a committed vegan. I've been vegetarian since I was very young, and veganism came to me a bit later. And I feel quite strongly about it for obvious reasons. The one for me, the original one is animal welfare. The second is environment. And the third is health. So it fits beautifully with the restaurant. And I think it would be great to actually train superb vegan chefs to go out there and do it by stealth. That's why we're here.
Talk to me about the restaurant. How did that come about, and what's the process been so far?
Well, I suppose the reason I wanted a restaurant was for the obvious reason. You know, if I'm going to train in hospitality, yes, I could find a kitchen. Yes, I could do a training kitchen. Lots of people do that. It doesn't give them jobs. For me to be able to go to the private sector and say, look, I have who I keep saying Fred, Bert, whoever, he's worked with me, he's got a reference from us, he's worked in a commercial setting, I absolutely know he can crack this. I'll be the buffer between a conviction and the hospitality industry. Now, to do that, I had to have something that was, I suppose, stood up to scrutiny, and that meant commercial. So did I do a cafe? Did I do a bistro? I suppose in my ways, it's a cafe bistro. So it'll be a cafe during the day, in the sense that it's allowing people who are training, my students, as I will call them, just to get their feel for it. Everything will be cooked from scratch. The evening will be fine dining, so that we can up the ante, so we can actually train them from the beginning, from making carrot soup to significantly beautiful food for the night, hence the restaurant. So I needed a building. I wanted to work with Scottish Prison Service. I've worked with them in the past. They are doing a really hard job. They do the best they can, but they train them often inside. But short-term sentences, very hard to work with them. And so there was a gap for people who needed the chance to change their lives. So I spoke to them over many years, and somehow persuaded them that, yes, I am bonkers, because that's what they think, but that there was a building that's been disused, and that perhaps there was little risk in allowing me to take it over and work with people with convictions. And not just people with convictions, people who are at risk of offending, people who have mental health issues and really struggling, and who we know will fall through the cracks. And good for them. Scottish Prison Service turned up trumps and said yes. So hence the building. The building is architecturally beautiful. It's a Grade A listed building. It's on their land, so it fits beautifully, but it's outside the gates. And that's not been done before. So it'll be a vegan restaurant, working with people with convictions, and training in horticulture. So we'll use all our own veg. And I think that's quite exciting. I have to find the money to renovate now. I will say that. It's not that easy, Tom. So if you know anybody with $500,000, I'd love to speak to them. The planning is in, and we now wait. It's a Grade A listed building, so listed building consent's gone in this week. And now we're nervously waiting, hopefully.
When did you find out that you were going to have the building? And I guess it's slightly annoying that at this time everything's got a lockdown.
Oh God! Do you know I'm normally an optimistic person. I had a suspicion that I could wear them down, because there was nothing for them to lose. The prison service really want to do the best. We have one of the worst prison stats in Europe. So the Scottish Prison Service are desperate to do something to reduce that. So I was sort of almost knocking at an open door. However, it is risky. I might fall flat on my face. So I had to prove to them that it was only my face that was going to get hurt. And I suppose the end result came this year. It was probably, I'm just trying to think when I signed the employment agreement. The employment agreement was signed in March, late February, early March. So very just before lockdown. So the employment agreement is for working with another prison in the horticulture, which is just up the road, and desperate to start there. We can start tomorrow if it wasn't for lockdown, but that will have to wait until lockdown's lifted. The big lottery's been kind enough to fund some of that. The building, yes. I suppose the bottom line is, when I've got the funding, then we just start work. Yes, lockdown, what's that done for me? I'm trying to look at the positive. I think I've learned to take a breath. I need £500,000 to make this a stunningly beautiful training kitchen. It has to be somewhere that my guys realise I value them. It's not going to be a kitchen that's this sounds awful. It's not going to be a kitchen that's in the back end of a shed. It has to be stunning. It has to have really nice equipment. They have to learn on the best, because I value them. They, in many cases, have not been valued. And so it makes a statement. I also need to make money, so it has to produce good food. So probably March was when I realised, yeah, okay, I think this is going to happen. 3 years in the making, I have to say. I was there this week, literally because of the courier paper with the photographer. That was, at sort of 2 meters distance. I'm desperate. I'm absolutely desperate to start renovating. We've got probably a 5-month window for renovation. We have to go through the normal planning and building warrant. And in that period, I'm looking for the money. So has lockdown helped? Possibly. If I can find the money in the next 2 months, that would be very good news. I'd love to open for January, but it's not going to happen. I have to be realistic. But it will happen. We will open next year.
How do you go about, in what ways are you now looking for money, and how do you go about that process?
Well, that's a good question. I've applied for charitable status. Now, there's 2 reasons for that. One, it opens other funders up for me, and I'm trying to be savvy. It opens up opportunities on other benefits. When the restaurant, if the restaurant is deemed out with my charitable status, then we'll set it up as a separate entity. So that's not a problem. We are doing charity work, so I would like the chance to benefit from that. And so that's one of the I suppose the walls I have to go through. The obvious other problem is it's renovating a historical building. There's a local trust that supports that, but only if I'm a charity. So I'm looking at the obvious ones. Big Lottery don't do buildings, so hopefully they'll fund the first 2 years' costs. I'm looking everywhere, to be quite honest. I've done this before with a big project, and so I'm hoping, I believe, positive vibes. 500,000's not much, is it? She says, total, I mean, is it worth me looking for social investment? Possibly. There are ways that I can get a grant and a loan. Grant not having to be paid back, the loan having to be paid. It restricts what I can do, because the reason this is happening is because I want to work with these socially isolated, vulnerable people. So I'm having to think that one through. It's hard work, I have to say, but hence I'm trying to look at it and go, it's not that much money, is it? Oh God, but hey ho. So yeah, working on everything I can. There are the obvious. There are lots of trusts out there for people, looking for money, and I will be touching base with all of them. But there are two different things. You've got running costs and you've got building costs, and the building costs are at the moment at the forerun for that. The horticulture is sorted. That's not a problem. And I suppose in many ways, the horticulture starts before the building's ready. So we'll have the vegetables, won't we? So, so we're trying.
Just in terms of, I don't know if you have statistics on this, but how important are things like this in terms of helping people that are just coming out of prison and changing their lives?
Massive. In Scotland, we have 1 in 3 men has a criminal conviction. 1 in 3, 1 in 10 women. Probably 49 to 55% of the people in prison are there for minor crime, vandalism, petty theft, not violent crime. We have short-term sentences which are really crippling the actual prison services, but also short-term sentences. You put somebody into prison for a year and a half, they have very little chance to be trained, and they have enough time to learn about how to cope with prison. And that can mean many things, but often a change of behavior. And they come out knowing nothing of how to survive. So from the point of view of stats, if we can take one person and train them and empower them and support them in holding down a full-time job for 2 years, we can save the public purse an astronomical amount of money, over £750,000. That's massive. Now that's to cover the costs of the prison, to cover the costs of all the court case, the police involved, the legal status, everything. A significant number of people that go to court will have 5 charges. And so taking all of that into consideration, social work, everything, you're looking at almost £900,000. And that's quite a lot of money. So when you're looking at 500,000 to actually keep them out of prison, I think that's quite cheap. So if I can take 10 people and keep them out of trouble, help them to change their behavior, allow them the chance to stand up and have some self-belief, the benefits financially for the public purse is enormous, but the benefits for them you can't even count them. They have families, they have children, they have wives, they have husbands, they have, so much to give communities if they're allowed to do that. And I feel really strongly about that. I've talked to too many people in prison who, made a mistake. And that mistake got them into real trouble. And that trouble got them into having to sit and eat with people that perhaps are best kept in prison. And that's really not good. So the stats are in my favour. And that's important. So yeah, lots of big stats.